good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
Sheriff, you're not cheating on your wife if you eat my lemon square.
Your lemon squares taste like ass.
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking Excursions Unlimited. We're talking telescope drama. And we're talking present number one. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking a woman with an unusual fear of being raped by dwarves.
Oh my god. I do love that Lee has an unconventional sense of humor, shall we say. But there are a couple of lines where I'm like, ooh, this does not work in the year of our Lord 2022.
But it did work in the year of our Lord 1978 on television.
On television. The things you can get away with on television, Trace.
Exactly. Everyone, we are discussing Someone's Watching Me, directed and written by John Carpenter, but not named John Carpenter, Someone's Watching Me, because that didn't exist yet.
Indeed. And also, you did not put enough emphasis on the exclamation mark, sir.
Okay, isn't it funny, though? Because months ago when we did Who Framed Roger Rabbit, we were like, oh, yeah, you can't have a question mark at the end of your title, but I don't know what the rule is on exclamation points.
Well, we're in TV, as we said, so maybe it's a whole different set of rules.
No, I'm sorry, let me do it in like the Camilla Bell When a Stranger Calls voice. Someone's watching me!
Wait, are you sure you're not just doing Paz de la Herda in Nurse? Someone's watching me.
Nevertheless, actually, I'm a little shocked, Joe, that we didn't program this in June when we covered Chloe Okuno's Watcher on our Patreon, because this would have been a really good companion piece.
This is true. Yeah, they do feel almost like symbiotic to one another, right? And of course, folks, you can go back and listen to that Patreon episode because it's a banger. We really like that movie. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting to watch this as almost a prototype for what we start to get in later films about stalking.
Well, and that's what's so interesting, right? Because this was on TV. This didn't go to theaters. And I mean, look, we can talk about how brilliant John Carpenter is at writing characters, specifically female characters, and we'll probably talk about that a bit in this episode. But yeah, that we're dealing with something like this. And again, a movie that aired once, maybe twice, on NBC and was considered a lost film of Carpenter's for decades because you couldn't find this movie on any kind of home video format.
Yeah, I have a fascination with things like made-for-TV movies. Like, I can't remember if we talked about it here or if I talked about it on my side podcast, White Ladies in Crisis, because we covered, like, Hallmark movies and Lifetime movies every once in a while on that. And the reality is like, they're kind of the same, but they're also not the same at all. Like, the structure and the writing style and the acting and obviously the budget and that kind of stuff feels like they're kind of a weird cousin to a traditional Hollywood theatrical film.
Well, and here's the thing. And so I have the Scream Factory Blu-ray of this movie, and there were a ton of special features. It's like an interview with Adrienne Barbeau, an interview with Charles Cyphers. They're each like 10 minutes long. But the only other major special feature is an audio commentary with author Amanda Reyes, who wrote the book Are You in the House Alone? A TV Movie Compendium, 1964 to 1999. And
yeah, because these were bread and butter.
Very much so. And I wasn't going to watch this commentary because I was like, it's not Carpenter. Like, what do I care?
I fully remember you saying this to me earlier this week. You were like, I don't know who this is. I'm not listening to that.
Well, and so I just put it on today because I was working from home. And honestly, there's a lot. I never thought, oh, right, like, a person who's written a book is doing a commentary and not the creator. But like, I found some like really nice insights from this woman on this commentary that I will hopefully bring into the episode today.
Okay.
But, okay, so why don't we just start with that? So I'm going to start really kind of far out there, Joe, but I need you to bear with me because it will all come back to Someone's Watching Me, okay?
I'm ready.
So, the man who got Someone's Watching Me for NBC is a man by the name of Fred Silverman. And That man was president of NBC at the time. Actually, he
Okay.
had just been made president. So I'm going to dive into this man for a bit. So in grad school, Silverman's 406-page master's thesis.
Oh my God, no. No.
It analyzed 10 years worth of ABC programming. And this would have been like in the 60s, by the way.
Okay.
This led to his hiring at WGN-TV in Chicago, which was followed by positions at WPIX in New York and then at CBS. And his first job at CBS was to oversee the network's daytime programming. So
Right.
in 1970, he was promoted from Vice President of Program Planning and Development to Vice President Programs. So what he did there was he headed the entire program department at CBS, and he was promoted primarily to bring a change in perspective to the network, as it had just forced out the previous executive in that position, Michael Dann. And Dan's philosophy was to draw as many viewers as possible without regard to T demographics, which the network found to be unacceptable.
Yeah, that definitely wouldn't fly nowadays.
No, but again, we're talking the early days of demographic targeting, and so the reason they thought that was unacceptable is because by this point, advertisers had become more specific about what kind of audiences they were aiming for. And I find this really interesting because, again, they didn't have to care about this before. They were just like, oh, let's just like cast a wide net.
Yeah, it's like put as much on as you can.
Exactly. And I find it interesting because, as some people may know, I work in print media. And it's something where, we obviously when I came on, they'd already started advertising in online, social media, whatever, but they haven't really kind of nailed like the transition. And so it's similar to that, right? Like, but also because with online advertising, you can look at demographics, you can look at performance, and you can't do that in print media. So, okay, advertisers were becoming more specific about what kind of audience they were aiming for. And so to boost viewership and demographics that were believed to be more willing to respond to commercials, Silverman orchestrated the Rural Purge of 1971. And this is a thing that's so important that it even has its own Wikipedia entry.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The Rural Purge eventually eliminated many popular country-oriented shows like Green Acres, the Andy Griffith Show spinoff Mayberry RFD, Hee Haw, and the Beverly Hillbillies. All of those were thrown out of the CBS schedule whenever Fred Silverman came on board.
Wow. Okay.
In their place, however, came a new wave of classics aimed at the upscale baby boomer generation, such as All in the Family, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, MASH, Kojak, The Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour. Now, this is kind of unrelated, but I feel compelled to point it out, Joe.
Okay.
On Saturday mornings, Silverman commissioned Hanna-Barbera to produce the cartoon series Scooby-Doo,
so
Where Are You?
So you love this man because he is an integral part of your horror origin story.
Without this man, Scooby-Doo wouldn't exist. Or maybe it is, but maybe a different iteration. But anyway, the character of Fred Jones is named after Fred Silverman.
Oh, wow.
The success of Scooby-Doo led to several other Hanna-Barbera series airing on CBS in the early 70s. So, that's his tenure at CBS. In early 1974, Silverman ordered a Maude spinoff titled Good Times, and that series' success led Silverman to schedule it against ABC's new hit Happy Days the following fall. But
sidebar, Maude is a fantastic show.
Okay, I'd heard of it, but I never watched it because the name Maude just doesn't sound appealing to me. And I wasn't a Golden Girls watcher, so I wasn't familiar with B. Arthur. So when I saw at this point in time, because Adrienne Barbeau was in Someone's Watching Me, she plays Maude's daughter, and I was like, oh, like, what is this? And then I go look it up, and I'm like, oh god, this is like a super left-wing, like very progressive sitcom from the early 70s.
And the fact that it's developed out of like a super conservative television show that's, like All in the Family.
Yeah.
It's kind of astounding, but also, like the show is just really fucking funny and very feminist. Like one of the first shows to tackle abortion.
I wouldn't call All in the Family... Archie Bunker is conservative.
That's a better way of putting it. Thank you.
Yeah. No, you're good. All right, so that's 1974. He's brought in to make Good Times, crush Happy Days.
Okay.
In 1975, Silverman then moves over to ABC. He is named the president of ABC Entertainment, putting him in the ironic position of saving Happy Days, the very show that Good Times had brought to the brink of cancellation.
Oh, so ironic. And I imagine this is like, because television is a much smaller game at this point, right? Like there's probably only a couple of key stations or like studios, right? So you would know all the players and you would know all the strategies. So how hilarious. He's like, oh shit, now I gotta jump sail and try to do this thing that I was trying to sink Great.
Exactly. Here's the thing, though. Again, Happy Days is almost going to get canceled, and then they bring him in. He succeeded in bringing Happy Days back to the top of the ratings.
Wow.
And generating a hit spinoff from that show, which was Laverne and Shirley.
Oh my god, huge.
Yeah, and they also got another spinoff, Mork and Mindy, which was a huge ratings winner its first season, but then tanked after that.
Yeah.
So, at ABC, Silverman also greenlit other popular series such as Charlie's Angels, Donnie and Marie, Three's Company, Eight is Enough, The Love Boat, Soap, Fantasy Island, Good Morning America, and the award-winning miniseries Roots.
Jesus Christ, this guy's good.
I'm telling you. Also, during his time at ABC, he overhauled the network's Saturday morning cartoon output, replacing it with content from Hanna-Barbera, including a continuation of Scooby-Doo, and I promise this is my last Scooby-Doo reference.
Oh my god. Paolo!
So, okay, now let's go to NBC. So,
okay.
Although Silverman's tenure at ABC was very successful, he left to become president and CEO of NBC in 1978.
Well, that CEO gig means a lot more money, probably.
Very much so. But here's, again, another funny thing. So after bringing on shows like Charlie's Angels and whatnot to ABC, he talked about, at NBC, his desire to bring more quality programming to the station, citing shows like Three's Company and Charlie's Angels as being beneath what NBC wanted.
Ooh, wow. He's like getting all class sensitive, like, oh no, we need to have more high sophistication shows.
Well, because he was critiqued a lot for a lot of his work, or a lot of the shows he brought on being escapist fare. And so I think he was trying to combat that.
Yeah.
So, in stark contrast with his tenures at CBS and ABC, his 3-year tenure at NBC proved to be a difficult period, marked by several high-profile failures to the point where he nearly bankrupted NBC.
Oh boy.
Despite these failures, there were high points in his tenure. So this included the launch of successful comedies like Different Strokes and The Facts of Life, and he also made the series commitments right before his 1981 departure to Cheers and St. Elsewhere, which would go on to premiere in 1982. All of this being said, Variety wrote an article criticizing some of his choices, specifically those of looking for more quality programming. The article's title was NBC's High Road is Filled with Potholes.
Oh, critics. Doing it for the SEO equivalent of like the late 70s and early 80s.
Exactly.
All the way back in the day.
But nevertheless, he is still responsible for Someone's Watching Me, and I felt it necessary to just go through his history to show how he thought. So, when TV first started being a big thing, that advertisers could really come in, the strongest demographic was women aged 18 to 49. Now, Joe, do you know why that might be?
Disposable income?
It's the housewives who are responsible for also buying the products to keep in the house.
Ah, that does make sense. Okay.
So advertisers wanted to put their stuff in shows and films that cater to them, which is why you started seeing more TV movies and shows centered around women and their issues.
Their issues? Oh my god.
Well, and so, because here's the other thing. So we're in the era of second wave feminism, and while there isn't any sexual assault or rape explicitly in Someone's Watching Me, there have been arguments made that just the idea of, again, this watcher figure, it's a rape of the mind. Because what the second wave feminists were trying to do was to try to convince everyone, hey, rape is not sex, rape is about power.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and Sophie literally says the word rape in this movie.
Absolutely. And John Carpenter knew that because he was no stranger to feminists.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Anyway, again, important to note, TV movies only aired once, maybe twice if you were lucky. So the ads for Someone's Watching Me were emphasizing, how you had to be there to watch it, and there's that whole thing. So, stepping away from Silverman for a bit, just to go into the production of this movie, because it didn't start as a TV movie. The film had the working title High Rise, and Carpenter was hired by Warner Brothers in 1976 to write a feature script based on a true story about a woman in Chicago. So I'm surprised they didn't have that on the marketing, right? Based on a true story, but nevertheless. He spent 3 months writing it and handed it in with the idea that it was going to theaters. 8 months later, Warner's contacted him saying they wanted to do it as a TV movie and offered him the chance to direct it. Well, involved in all this is Fred Silverman somehow, who nabbed it for NBC.
Oh, yeah.
So, shooting took place in April of 1978. It lasted for either 10 days or 18 days. It depends on who you ask and which interview you see.
It's kind of a big difference in terms of shooting length.
It's weird. So, in Barbeau's interview on this Blu-ray, she says 10 days. But in another interview that you can find, she says 18. Carpenter also goes back and forth. And so, 18 days seems to be the norm for a TV movie, so let's go with that.
Yeah.
My hunch is that Barbeau was only required to be filming for 10 days, which is why she thinks 10 days.
And she's really not in the movie as much as we might have hoped, so that would make sense, yeah.
Well, I mean, also, okay, whether it be 10 days or 18 days, Joe, do you think you could remember everything about a job you did for up to 18 days in 1978?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, before I was conceived, I definitely worked a 10-day job at, like, a Home Depot.
Oh my god. So, okay, Carpenter did have some control over the film, but he either didn't have time for coverage or he didn't want to do any coverage so that he could just give the producers the dailies and get them okayed.
Sure.
I should point out this was Carpenter's first union experience. He had previously only directed 1974's Dark Star, which was pretty much filmed in a garage, and 1976's Assault on Precinct 13, but it did allow Carpenter to get into the Directors Guild and, again, teach him his union habits.
There we go.
Regarding production, so again, this is April of 78. 2 weeks after this movie wraps, Carpenter spent the entirety of the next month, May of 1978, shooting Halloween.
Never heard of it.
Just a tiny little movie, right? So
Right, yeah.
he's on record saying that many of the techniques he used in Halloween, he devised while filming Someone's Watching Me. And I tried to keep an eye out for this while we were, watching the movie.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest one I could see is at the climax at the very end when Lee walks into her apartment, the lights are all out, and he does his thing where he just shows all the empty rooms, just like how the end of Halloween has Michael, his POV looking at all the different spots in Haddonfield.
Right. Yeah.
But nevertheless, I mean, again, y'all watch it, see if you can find some more out. But Carpenter later said that he was very proud of this film, even though it was not one of his better known works. And I didn't, there is not a ton of interesting information about the casting, but I did want to point out, we said Adrienne Barbeau's casting came about because Carpenter had seen her as B. Arthur's daughter on Maude. He was also familiar with her work as Rizzo in the original Broadway cast for Grease.
Oh, I didn't know.
I didn't know that either!
Good for her. I mean, big shocker. Fucking Adrienne Barbeau is amazing and big surprise.
I mean, originating the role of Rizzo. Who would have thought? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are like, duh, Trace, that's literally...
you idiots, yeah.
But, I mean, Joe, of course, we all probably know her best as the voice of Simone Lenoir in Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, right?
You said you were done. You said you were done, and then you were not done, and now I'm walking away.
Nevertheless, Barbeau and Carpenter would get married the following year in 1979 and stay married until the divorce in 1984.
Oh gosh, I also forgot that he married her.
They have a kid.
Wow.
I know. So, Someone's Watching Me premiered on NBC on November 29th, 1978, the last day of November sweeps. Are sweeps a thing anymore?
They are not a thing anymore because we've moved to a full year television cycle, but even probably back in the 2010s, February sweeps, November sweeps, still a big deal for advertising.
Do you want to tell some of maybe our younger listeners what a sweep is?
Sure. It's a month-long period where television advertisers would take note of how shows on a particular network were performing, and they would use those figures to sell advertising rates for the rest of the year. So you needed major events, which is why you would get stuff Grey's Anatomy is going to be doing a 200th episode, and we're also killing off half the cast in a helicopter crash. It's
my god.
Yeah. And we save that for sweeps so that we goose the numbers, and therefore we can charge advertisers higher rates throughout deader months.
February sweeps, so it's November and February, or is it May?
Mm-hmm. No, November and February.
Got it. No, because February is also the Valentine's episode where Carter and Lucy get stabbed in the ER.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
If y'all were not alive for that, that's what got me into ER, was that stabbing episode.
Oh man. For some people, that's one of their most traumatic memories of that show.
It's horrifying. Poor Lucy.
It is horrifying.
Poor Lucy. So ratings-wise, Someone's Watching Me came in at number 218 out of 314 made-for-TV movies and specials. So it did not do well in that 1978-79 season.
That number's not impressive.
Okay, but here's some perspective, Joe. It got a 14.4 over 22. And what this means...
Wow.
14.4 million homes were watching Someone's Watching Me, and those 14.4 million homes represented 22% of the television viewing audience.
Yeah. Again, like the competition across the different networks was not as heavy because there wasn't streaming, there wasn't 600 plus channels, but still, like, you see numbers like that and they're really impressive.
Well, but not back then, but today The Walking Dead gets like 10, well, I'm sorry, not today, maybe like 5 years ago. The Walking Dead gets like 10 million views, and that's almost unheard of for a television show.
Yeah, because we've like fractured the viewing audience into a million different pieces. So basically no one is ever watching the same thing as other people at the same time, unless it's some kind of major event. Like, think of when we all watched Malignant on the same drop date. Like, that kind of stuff is rare nowadays, but it used to happen a lot more frequently back in, oh God, I was about to say the old times.
Well, nevertheless, 14.4 million homes watching Someone's Watching Me was considered a failure. So, there we go. Reviews were generally positive for the film. I mean, again, I'm sure we're all grading on a for a TV movie scale. Carpenter was nominated for the 1979 Edgar Award of Best Television Feature or Miniseries. I'm not sure if he won, but since Wikipedia just says he was nominated, I'm going to take it for word that he did not win that award.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is kind of, I literally was like, I mean, Joe, what did I tell you earlier this week where I was like, I'm not going to have much of a production history, but then I found it.
There we go. And here's the thing, folks. So if you listen to this and you're like, wow, that's a lot of preamble for a TV movie, it's because there's often a hidden side to Hollywood, like the way that things come together. And also, we wanted to make sure that we were doing this right because we have never covered a made-for-TV movie before. We've covered a DTV movie in Mirror Mirror, but, there's often hidden production histories that are worth highlighting because they are different than when they go theatrical.
Well, and it's, so again, like this Amanda Reyes, who wrote this book on TV movies, I was like, that's a really niche area to devote your life to. But again, it's like listening to her talk about it, I was like, oh shit, like there's some really, because there's a whole thing where she's like, TV movies were able to do something that theatrical movies couldn't, because again, the theatrical market, they're primarily targeting men because they're the ones that are going out and buying the tickets and seeing the movie. I mean, again, like that's what they think.
Right. And don't forget, I don't think that TV is the purview of places like the MPAA.
Exactly. And so again, you have a medium, television, which is considered a quote unquote woman's market. So they actually have films and TV shows that are specifically geared towards them. And that means also if you're writing for a TV movie like Carpenter was, why are you going to write stupid women in your movie, right? Like if you're marketing towards women, do that. And so that's why a big part of the reason why this movie again is considered to be one of the better TV movies of the 70s.
Right. I mean, I can't confess to having seen a bunch of them, but like my sister and I have watched a bunch of really shitty Lifetime movies in the 90s. And I'm not making disparaging remarks because there's absolutely an audience for that. And if that's what you're looking for, then it's giving you what you want. And there is also good quality Lifetime, Hallmark, whatever. So, sorry, now I sound like I'm being super
you're fine.
defensive. Just to say, like, there is a market for these things, but also some of them are still better done than others. And watching Someone's Watching Me was like, oh, wow, this is kind of feminist as fuck. It's interesting to see this career woman be unapologetic about her aspirations. Also, she's fending off ogres this entire movie. Like, the movie's interest in sexual politics was fascinating to me. And we're going to talk about a little bit about why and how stalking comes to be a thing as we move through the episode. But like, again, the year this comes out is like, we were not really having these kinds of discussions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, because we'll call Leah final girl in this scenario, but again, that term wouldn't really be coined for a while until, Carol Clover wrote her infamous book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws. But part of the final girl trope is that, she starts off mousy, meek, whatever, and she gets stronger and better, for lack of a better term, as she starts to take on more masculine and male attributes to go after the killer.
Right.
That is not the case with this movie, Joe. Yeah. This movie takes the final girl trope, which again doesn't exist at this point, but it ignores that, and she is strong from the get-go. She doesn't have to go through a transformation because she's already there. So that in and of itself is a bit transcendent and subversive of something you would see in the horror genre.
Yeah, and I'll confess, the way this movie played, I fully thought that she was going to end up being a damsel in distress, because I guess the other thing I didn't mention as I was watching the Hallmark and Lifetime movies with my sister in the 90s is that a lot of those movies sort of do that traditional, it's a woman being stalked and she needs a hunky police officer to save her, or, she needs a reporter to save her, and sometimes she can end up saving herself, but women in danger as a subgenre, as a sort of thriller offset, is very popular, and I fully thought that in this movie it was going to be, Paul's going to have to break in and save her. And I love the fact that Lee ends up saving herself.
Well, and I was going to say this for the very end when we get there, but let me just tell you this. Lauren Hutton did an interview with the Austin American-Statesman, which is actually my competitor from the Austin Chronicle, by the way.
Ooh, maybe you should jump over there, sync them, and then jump back to the Chronicle.
Oh my God, right? So anyway, though, she said she was unhappy with the ending that's in the film because she was actually supposed to, according to the script, have much more of a longer fight. She was supposed to fight back, but the powers that be at the network said it wouldn't be ladylike for her to fight back.
Oh my God.
So isn't that hilarious? Given, again, everything we have just talked about with feminism, her fighting back was a step too far.
Well, I mean, we're also talking about a period of time when it's exclusively men who are making those decisions. Like, you don't have women CEOs in the late 70s.
Exactly. And that's why, I mean, again, everyone, I do like this movie. I don't think it's a fantastic movie. I think it's, life-changing.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fine.
Given the time period, given that it is a TV movie, given that it is a man making this movie, I think there's a lot of really fascinating just things you wouldn't see at this time from something like this. So again, for that, I think it's historically significant, even if it may not mean the quality is like a 4-star film.
Yeah, this is breezy. There were parts of it that I liked and other parts where I thought, okay, you've kind of lost me. But overall, I mean, this is a solid kind of, I'll just throw this on. It's a decent time.
Yeah. So why don't we start talking about this movie again?
Okay. So, we start off in New York City. We watch as the city fades from day to night, and then we see a man with a giant fucking telescope, and he is threatening a woman who we don't really see, but we hear her voice. This is Elizabeth. She is played by Lauren Hutton. And he basically says, I'm always going to be with you. You're never going to get rid of me, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, no, I'm getting out. You're not going to be able to follow me. And then we get the credits.
Wait, okay, so this... I wasn't sure if this was meant to be her or not.
I also did not know. I ended up resorting to the Wikipedia entry for this. The reason I'm suggesting it is because Lee is an abbreviation of Elizabeth.
Got it. Because we get the mention later where it's like, oh yeah, there's been 4 women who died by suicide at other places this guy was monitoring. So I just assumed that was his last victim. But that does make sense. And also, we never know, at least... Lee never vocalizes what exactly her history is outside of man troubles.
This is true. Yeah. And I feel like it's deliberately written in that way where you could see it as, oh, she just had an issue with a man, or, oh, she was being aggressively stalked by a man with a phallic telescope.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so following the credits, we have Lee being shown apartment 4320 in Los Angeles' Arkham Tower, and she's getting this tour by Leon, who is played by James Murtaugh, and she's cracking jokes, she's wandering around, she's just kind of having a good time, she's carefree, fancy-free.
Yeah.
I don't know, as an introduction to Lauren Hutton's character, actually getting to see her and watch her negotiate this space, which, by the way, is so 70s beige.
Well, I was going to say, was this giving you, any house porn or apartment porn for you?
I mean, the space is quite big, but I was mostly I kind of miss the salmon coloring of Looker.
I mean, that's also, oh my God, where are they in that movie? Is it Romania?
In Looker? No.
Oh my God, I'm sorry, I was singing Watcher. Oh my God. Sorry. Yes. Also, plug, everyone, go read our article on Looker from a couple years ago, because that movie is a treat.
It's such bananas nonsense, yeah. But no, I mean, this apartment it's interesting because it's not as ostentatious as I expected it to be, but it is lovely. It's got a large balcony, it's got a giant living room space that she spends most of her time in, and you can tell that she's just excited by the prospect of something new.
Well, and let's also get this off the table here. Lee is immediately not your typical woman that you would see in 1978. She's a single woman. She's working at a television studio, no less.
Yep.
She is fun. She's sassy. She jokes a lot. She has a lot of, again, characteristics you would typically see in male characters in films at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think normally if we saw a character like this, she would be man-hungry, right? Or she would have girlfriends or someone who would be telling her, oh, you need to settle down, you need to get married. And we don't really have that in this film. Like, she is very much a career woman. And I think we can chalk that up to that second wave feminism where women were starting to say, no, I want to have a career and maybe I'm not going to settle down immediately. And if I get a piece of man, it might be side candy or it might just be temporary.
Well, and also, I mean, like, we haven't gotten to Sophie yet, but we will. But, like, in another lesser version of this movie, Sophie would be, like, competing with her for a job or promotion or something.
Yes.
I mean, I didn't check, but I'm pretty sure this movie passes the Bechdel test at some point.
I think so, even just in the conversations that Sophie has around her sexuality, because they're not talking about men. Ha ha.
We'll talk about that soon.
Yeah. Okay, so Lee ends up taking this apartment, and as she is unpacking, she's talking to herself about how she thinks it's going to be a great relationship between her and LA. And unfortunately, this is when we then cut, and we're seeing Lee from the telltale crosshairs of a telescope as she is just kind of standing around on the balcony.
So I know we can't do this now because we've already watched it, but listeners, if you're going to watch this movie after hearing this episode, always pay very special attention to whose gaze the camera is from, because we have a lot of male gaze in this film, despite the fact that it doesn't ever sexualize Lee, but we do have a lot of the POV of the killer, and there are certain times where it will switch, and we will get the female gaze as it's Lee's POV, and that's always by very specific intent on Carpenter's part.
Yeah, I would say there is one moment when she is, well, I'd say there's two moments where she's sexualized, but we can talk about them as we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so we then watch Lee as she kind of talks herself up and goes over her resume. This is a very smart way to do exposition about her background so that we know she's looking for a job. We know that she has had issues with men in the past where she is already anticipating she's going to be hit on by the elderly station manager.
And then some. She gets hit on by like 5,000 guys in this movie.
Indeed. Oh my gosh, yeah. So she hops in the car and she's driving. We do see that someone appears to be following her, but we never really get a close look at them. And then we are at the TV station, and she's being interviewed by station manager Mr. Fremsen, who is played by John Mahone, and he more or less just dumps her into a trial by fire job interview situation. He's like, this is Sophie, played by Adrienne Barbeau. That's Steve, played by Granger Hines, and you need to direct this live cooking show. Goodbye.
Also, are you a little bummed that after Steve's pass at her later, we don't ever see him again for the rest of this movie?
Okay, so I debated whether or not to bring this up now or later, but one of my big issues with the film is that I feel like it's suggesting that we're going to know who the person watching her is. Like it's someone in her life and she just doesn't know. And Steve is very obviously a red herring. Mr. Fremsen's kind of a red herring. Sophie could be considered a red herring. And I was a little bit annoyed that we spend time with some of this, like the sexual harassment parts, and then it doesn't really end up paying off except to create a culture where she is just constantly being surveyed by men.
I think that's totally fair. And actually, this joins the ranks of movies like Watcher and like Knocking to me, where it's like, again, these women that are like experiencing things in their own apartments and things are going bad. But I always want them to go on for about 5 to 10 minutes longer after the credits roll, because I feel like they just end because
they just end.
The threat's gone. We're good. No. I want to know more.
Well, I think it's also really dismissive of trauma. Like, just because your assailant has been handled doesn't mean that you don't still have, like, a bunch of shit that you're going to need to deal with. And I know that that's very 2022 of me, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't think that it's just satisfying to say, oh, well, she killed the dude, and now she's going to be fine. You're like, no, she's still going to be hugely fucked up.
I mean, I said this in Watcher, and I'm sorry, spoilers for Watcher, but, like, her killing the guy isn't my end game. I want her to see. I want to see how she talks to her husband afterwards. Right? And in this movie, I would love to see her go to Charles Cyphers and be like, "Here,
Yeah, or like, can she pursue a relationship with Paul after this? Because she has been totally fucked up by men.
Look, the whole thing with this movie is, well, you know what? I'll save it till we get started to the stalking because
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so she ends up performing very well under pressure and she gets this job. So Sophie takes her over to the office and fucking Trace, I love this so much. Sophie sits her down and she's like, just so you know, I'm a lesbian, but you're not my type.
Well, but okay, so the way, the exact line exchange, you know, she's like, oh, like, you know, a man like fucked you up or whatever, but you know, like PG rated.
Mm-hmm.
I can see the look in your face because I've seen it in my face in the mirror sometimes. And Lauren Hutton's like, oh, like, what was his name? And she's like, oh, her.
Mm-hmm.
And when Barbeau read that in the script, you know, she asked Carpenter because she actually assumed that he had taken it from his own personal life. She actually thought John Carpenter was gay, and that's why he wrote that line.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But he just told her, he was like, well, I'm not. But he goes, but if I was, this is how I would tell someone, like, discreetly or, like, you know, cavalierly, like, hey, by the way, I'm a homo.
And that's the thing that I love. Sophie is such a no-nonsense character. She will say what's on her mind. And she does it so matter-of-factly that even in this scene, Lee looks at her, there's a beat where she kind of says, oh, but she doesn't say it out loud. And then we just move forward because that's what queer people want. It's like, you know what? I'm not quite like you, but I'm still a regular fucking human being. You don't need to treat me like I'm going to break or like I'm a weird object that's going to give you a rash.
Well, and again, thank God I listened to this commentary because Reyes goes all in on the status of queer representation, or at least of lesbians in the 70s. And before I go in on that, I want to point out, though, so you as a viewer, as a queer viewer, doesn't it already make you like Lee so much more when you see her reaction to Sophie's
100%,
confession?
because I was clocking it.
Yeah.
I was looking to see, oh, is she going to say something and then take it back? Is she going to have to process it? And then, like, in 5 scenes, she'll be like, oh, Sophie, I'm actually fine with it.
Yeah.
No, she's fine with it almost immediately.
Yeah.
It's super great.
And that's something, too. I'm not saying, like, straight people can't understand that, but it's a thing where I'm like, that... At this point, Lee can do no wrong for me. Because she's a woman in 1978 who doesn't bat an eye at her new coworker that she's sharing an office with, telling her she's gay.
Yeah, and she clearly also suffers no fools when it comes to men. So you're just like, wow, she's got her shit together.
Oh, yeah, not at all. So, okay, let's go into what Reyes is saying here, because, this is fascinating. So, in the 1970s, gay characters were just coming to the forefront of television, and it was kind of a mixed bag. Policewoman featured a trio of lesbian killers, and there was a Marcus Wilby episode titled The Outrage, which was coincidentally met with actual outrage by gay and lesbian groups because they portrayed a gay man as a child molester.
Oh, but of course, yes.
There were better written characters on sitcoms. So we had Billy Crystal's Jody on the sitcom Soap, which was a spoof of soap operas.
Which you just mentioned because that was one that Fred developed.
There you go. And there was also Fred developing All in the Family episodes. There's one which, actually, I had to watch this one in college. I have never seen All in the Family. Like, my TV Land days growing up, like, I was watching The Brady Bunch. I was watching Bewitched and I Dream of Jeannie. I didn't watch things like All in the Family or Happy Days or Good Times or whatever the fuck.
So shows with men, you were like, no, thank you.
Not really. But again, like, I don't know why I didn't watch The Golden Girls, but maybe that's because it was like they hadn't really started putting like the 80s or like those 80s shows on TV land yet. We were still firmly in the 70s when I was growing up.
Okay.
But yeah, we had a few All in the Family episodes, like this one where Archie misidentifies an effeminate man to be gay when he's actually his friend, who's this renowned football player. There was also Three's Company, which sort of walked this line of embracing the stereotypical gay man, so that a straight man could live with 2 women while also dismantling the stereotype by showing how inherently goofy that stereotype actually was.
Yeah.
And they did this by presenting the way Mr. Roper would respond to Jack, the John Ritter character, with an ignorant joke because he believed he was gay, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of like having your cake and eating it too, because you get to have people identify with that character, but most people would be in on the joke and be like, no, but John Ritter's totally not gay, so...
Well, and that's, I mean, with All in the Family, like, I will confess, when I first watched this episode of All in the Family, it was like my introduction to film class, my sophomore year of college, and I was so put off by this character that I was like, how was this such a... I mean, I knew I would have been a big hit, but it took me a bit to realize, but Archie's the butt of the joke in all of these scenarios. Like, he's the voice of the majority, like, conservative generation, but the show is tackling that and saying, no, you're stupid.
Yeah. In a way, it reminded me of the way that people treated, like, the Colbert Show way, way, way later, where it's almost, this is the character is a joke, like he's a farce, and yet you can see why certain people would take it at face value and misunderstand it.
Exactly. So there was visibility on TV, but no one knew how to correctly handle gay characters, really. And it turns out that TV movies are the ones that were doing it better.
Hey.
There were some really interesting gay-themed entries, including the award-winning That Certain Summer, which Reyes thinks is excellent, and starred Martin Sheen and Hal Holbrook in non-stereotypical gay roles. I think this was 1972.
I've heard of that one. Yeah.
There was the flawed but interesting In the Glitter Palace, which co-starred Chad Everett and Diana Scarwid. Diana Scarwid, yay!
Hey!
About a lesbian accused of committing a murder. It does have issues, but Reyes says it does its best trying to keep things frank and honest.
Okay.
But Reyes thinks that one of the most interesting gay characters from this era is Adrienne Barbeau's Sophie, who is not only non-stereotypical, but it's also like it's an afterthought that she's gay. In that way, it's a pretty progressive portrayal of someone who just happens to be gay, instead of making their sexual preference that defining trait. And, John Carpenter just understands female characters and writes them really well, but in general, Reyes thinks he just understands people, and he gives them all something really unique and interesting for us to hold on to.
That is interesting, right? Because I feel like whenever we have conversations about primarily Halloween and Laurie Strode and her friends, people always want to talk about how John Carpenter writes women well, or they want to give credit to Deborah Hill, which I would say both arguments are correct, and you should probably say them one after the other. But it's fascinating to me that, John Carpenter, I think, is just really adept at making people interesting. Like, he makes characters feel like they are three-dimensional. Even characters like Sophie, where we don't really know that much about her, but we get the impression she has a rich interior life. We just happen to only see that when she interacts with Lee, because of course this is Lee's story and not hers.
Exactly.
I will say, though, it's kind of ironic that Reyes says, it's sort of like a matter-of-fact representation, because that's literally how we had this movie listed in our spreadsheet when we were trying to decide what to cover. And it was like, Adrienne Barbeau is, no big deal lesbian. That's how we have it listed.
Yep, that's exactly it. And everyone, because I know that a lot of y'all like to go out and watch the movies that we cover if you haven't seen them, but I really would implore you, go watch this, because just for this role alone, even though it's not a huge role in the film, it's still very much worth seeing just for how important that is.
Yeah, and it is, honestly, I watched this and I thought, they were getting this back in the late 70s, and there are still shows that are struggling to not just be like, I'm the queer character!
Oh my god.
Blah!
Right? Like, take a page from the John Carpenter handbook.
Right, exactly. Okay, yeah, so we get this fantastic exchange, and then we get a quick prank phone call, but it's not certain what it is. It's kind of like, pick up the phone, something, hang it up, and then Steve comes in, and he just immediately starts hitting on Lee. And when she turns him down, he literally openly declares that he won't give up, even when she rejects him.
It is so obnoxious. This character sucks. And I cannot believe that the one kill we get in this movie, outside of the killer, it is not this man.
Yeah, I think that John Carpenter does a fantastic job of presenting these threats coming at Lee, and by extension, all women, all the time. Like, she talks about how she doesn't want to be hit on, but she is expecting it before she even goes in to get the job. And then she is hit on by this dude who she has met maybe 30 minutes earlier during a job interview. And it's just like, yeah, this is the lived experience of women. They have to put up with shitty fucking dudes all the time. But
it's so fun to watch Lee turn all these men down. And we haven't talked about Lauren Hutton, but Lauren Hutton is very charismatic in this role.
She's super great, yeah. Okay, so Lee returns home, and she finds that the apartment door is open. So she calls Mr. Leone to complain, and this is the first kind of big scare in the film. Oh. So in the background, as she's on the phone, we just see a man run by.
It's terrifying. Like, I've seen this movie once before, and it's been years, and so I forgot. I didn't remember most of the movie. This shot, this is like pure Carpenter, right? This also feels kind of like Halloween.
Yeah, because it's stuff happening in the background that if I had turned my head away to take a note or something, I might have missed this, if not for the sound of the door slamming. And I'll confess, I do get a little frustrated with Lee as the film goes on. She sometimes doesn't make smart decisions like I think the character would. And this is the first instance of that where she knows that the door was open. She suspects something is ajar or amiss. And then she hears the door slam, and she kind of casually just walks over, opens it, realizes there's nobody there, and then she's fine with it. And I'm like, no, ma'am, you think that someone was in here. You should take this more seriously.
Hey, you would ping me in ahead of time that you were like, yeah, I find a lot of her decisions frustrating because it makes her look stupid when we are very well aware that she is not a stupid character.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not making excuses, but I'm trying to figure out how much of this is 1978 mentality, because, it's like a thing where it's like, oh, people didn't lock their doors in suburbs because there was no threat. And so, granted, yes, I mean, you hear your own door slam, like you should do something about that.
Right.
But I'm wondering how much rationalizing she's doing, because again, at this time, it's like, well, it doesn't have to be that dangerous because it hasn't before. However, if we are subscribing to the idea that she has been bothered by her before, that she was the call in the opening scene, that does make her look more stupid.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the easy write-offs of this is to borrow a line from Jeffrey Craner of Random Horror Generator number 9. I always get their podcast name wrong, but he frequently talks about whether or not characters behave as though they know that they are in a horror film. And I would say that Lee doesn't always act like she knows that she's in as much danger as she is.
I will say, too, I mean, I've hinted at my experience with stalking on this podcast before, and it never got to this point, and it wasn't someone who lived in my city, so they weren't like stalking me that way. But it was still a point where I was like, I never really called the cops because I was like, no, it's not going to get that bad, or it's all in my head, or it's not really as bad as like I might be thinking it is, and so I rationalized a lot to avoid having to take that extra step, and so I can see how someone like Lee, if this isn't the second time she's gone through this, might be going through the same thought process.
Well, that's fair. Yeah, that's very, very fair. Because, I mean, I think of the way that people put off medical maladies because we just don't want to go to the doctor. And you would think, oh, well, if you feel like you're in danger, you would do something about it. But the reality is we don't want to be bothers to anybody. We don't want to go and maybe put ourselves out there and then have a police detective tell us, oh, I'm sorry, your scarediness is not real because I can't actually do anything for you.
Well, also, I mean, okay, actually, if Lee was the opening call in this movie, it might make sense also because when we get into the stalking laws at the time, she'd be well aware that there's not much she can do about this.
Yeah, that is true.
I mean, again, it doesn't stop me from being like, girl, like, do something.
I know, right? But I mean, because we also know, oh, Lee, sweetie, you're in a stalking movie.
Yes.
Like, there was a bed behind you. We all saw it. Oh, you didn't see it? Okay, well.
Exactly. So, anyway.
So then we get some really great comedy. So she sets up her desk that night, and she is just, like, working away on stuff. And the phone starts ringing, Trace, and it's motherfucking Steve. And Steve wants to keep asking her out, and she just keeps saying no and hanging up.
But when she fakes to be an answering service and she like tells him the time and she's like, no date, but at least you know what time it is. Get him.
How do you not love this character after these kinds of interactions, right?
She's so fun. She's fun.
Very fun. And then, of course, we get a little bit of a directorial flourish when the camera just sort of gently tilts down. And there under the desk that she has been sitting in front of is a mic, right? She's been bugged. So that's what the guy was doing when she came home.
And this is something, too, where I'm like, oh, because it takes her a very long time to figure out that, A, that he can see her. And B, yeah, that she's being bugged. And again, I chalk that up to 1978, where it's like, okay, but like, how common would this have been? Like, would you ever even think that someone is bugging your house?
Right. Yeah. Because you would default assume, well, people would have to get in here. And the technology, like, even when she finds it later in the film, it takes her a while to read through and be like, oh,
this is
recording. This is sound recording equipment. Like, whereas you and I look at it and we're like, yes, sweetie, you've been bugged.
No, that's a bug.
Yeah. Okay, so sometime later, Sophie and Lee are coming back with groceries, and this is when Sophie reveals that she's been offered a job in Fort Worth.
Boo.
Chekhov's job in Fort Worth.
Like, do you know where Fort Worth is?
I do not.
Okay, it's in Texas. It's like about 45 minutes west of Dallas, Texas.
Okay, and that's a boo?
I'm just like, you're gonna move. I mean, look, I don't want to live in LA because I think I get eaten alive there, but like Sophie seems like she's doing okay. And so she wants to move from LA to Fort Worth, Texas. Just
Right.
like, oh, and she's a lesbian.
I was going to say, Sophie, what's the lesbian situation in Fort Worth in 1978?
Maybe John Carpenter had a trip to Fort Worth once and he was like, man, there's a lot of lesbians here.
It's like lesbian capital. Who knew? Fort Worth.
Fort Worthians, let me know, please.
There we go. All right. So in the apartment, Lee she's also grabbed the mail. So she opens up this letter and it is from Excursions Unlimited. And they are offering her a free European vacation. But in order to choose the destination, they will first send her a series of free gifts. And holy shit, I was like, oh my God, this is a scam from day one. Sophie doesn't seem to think so. She's like, oh, I got a European vacation for free. I'm like, girl, you don't get free European vacations.
And we do see these today, right? Like, I mean, how many of these kind of spam emails do you get on a daily basis, right? And this is just the way how they did it in the 70s. They sent you letters and packages.
And again, just in case you didn't think that Lee had her head screwed on straight, she reads this letter and she calls it strange garbage. It's like, yep, she's clocked this immediately.
There we go.
So she's looking at the letter again later on when the lights start to flicker. And she's suspicious, but she doesn't read too much into it. But she also does leave the house immediately. She goes to Club Marcus so that she can have a drink, and she has to fend off men.
Yeah.
But then she, instigates a meet cute with Paul Winkless, who was played by David Barney. And yeah, this is where we get your line about being afraid of being raped by dwarves, which is just the weirdest thing you could say to someone you've only just met.
Also love that we have a woman joking about rape, by the way.
Oof. In a film about stalking.
So also, here's one of our very first switches in the male gaze, because when she starts walking towards Paul, we are getting a POV shot from Lee herself. So we have the female gaze in this scene. As she pursues a man doesn't pursue her.
Right.
I do want to read this bit too. Again, this is from Reyes as well, but she says, the strong portrayals, and this is kind of about the feminist ideals that the film puts forward, but she says, the strong portrayals of Lee and Sophie are sort of trying to be a resistance to the panopticon gaze. And the panopticon gaze is the idea of a silent, unknown overseer in the society, like a government that subconsciously controls all aspects of life. So 1984. Right. The term comes from a prison experiment where you'd have all the prisoners like on a circular lower level and a tower in the middle. So they just never knew when they were being watched since they couldn't see the guards.
Right.
Lee and Sophie are two women who reside outside of the cultural norms that have been set up by society. So when Lee meets Paul, he guesses that she works in the fashion industry because he looks her up and down and is like, oh, you're a woman of means and you clearly are important. You must work in fashion because you're a woman.
Right.
He's unintentionally stereotyped her and put her in that box. And then Sophie actually totally defies the cultural norms by being an openly gay woman. So going back to second wave feminism, this movie can be seen as an example of that, how second wave feminists were creating this sort of tension between how we were envisioning the way women should be and this sort of feminine resistance to that panoptic gaze. It's why the stalker is motivated to destroy women like Lee. Dependent women who choose their own suitors and their careers live outside these rules that have been set for them. So yeah, I love that is you can get those readings from this movie.
Oh, absolutely. Like, this is very much women who are in control and have agency are fucking scary to men. And the first thing that men can do is like, okay, I need to sexualize you. I need to make you scared and or humiliate you and possibly rape or kill you.
But nevertheless, let's have a fun date with Paul, because Carpenter puts us at ease as we go through their walk down the sidewalk.
Yeah, it's really lovely. We just get this long take. The actors get to do their thing. Again, this is a bit of exposition, so we get a better sense of who Lee is. She talks about her appendectomy. She talks about her relationship with her mom. We learn that he is a philosophy professor at USC, and it's just kind of lovely. They have a lovely chemistry. They're very easygoing, and then she smooches him goodbye. We, of course, see the POV from the stalker's point of view. They're hiding literally in the bushes.
So that's also, you can see some Halloween in here as well. But again, we have this long-ass scene, this exposition scene that you were talking about, that again, as the audience, we're like, okay, cool. Like, if you were scared by this movie, you're at ease. She's like, cool, nothing bad can happen here because she's with a man on the sidewalk in public, and then oops, then we get this POV shot, and we're like, fuck!
Yeah. So he ends up bidding her, well, he wants to spend the night with her, and she's like, no, we're not going to do that. And he's like, oh, are you sure? And she's like, no, we're not going to do that. So she gets into her car, and then she realizes, oh shit, I didn't really give him my number though. So she tries to chase after him, and he's already gone. So all of a sudden now our guard is back up, and Carpenter does a really good job of lighting here. Well, it's Carpenter and his team, because I'm sure he had people working the lights.
Yeah.
We get this like bar of light across Lee's face, and the score starts to kick up. So it's like an immediate shift. It was cutesy rom-com, and now all of a sudden, shit, we're back into thriller scary territory.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of get like a jump scare, but it's not that great because it's just some guy who's like, hey, can you help me? And she's like, no, and she drives off.
That jump scare is a bit more like, we've seen that a million times before.
Yeah.
But I actually like the one before. It's not really a jump scare, but it's right before she opens the car door, we see his face in the mirror, and then she opens it and it goes away. And so that was actually a really good one. But then, then it's followed up with she gets in the car, shuts the door, boo, there he is.
Yeah. Okay, so we fade in on Arkham Towers, presumably the next day or maybe a couple days later, and we see that the first of her Excursions Unlimited packages have arrived. So I loved this delay because you see a box, it's wrapped up. I want to know what the fuck is in it because I know that Excursions Unlimited is bullshit. Lee goes into the kitchen, she gets a glass of wine, she takes off her shoes, she curls up on the couch, then she opens the motherfucking box.
Well, I was watching this and I was like, have I been coming home from work wrong my entire life? Like, clearly I need to go home, I need to wear whatever this fucking red, ugly pattern, ruffled shoulder thing is that she's wearing that's kind of a vest, but kind of not.
Yeah.
Go get my glass of wine, light a cigarette, and just sit back and relax. Like, that's how I need to end my days.
Well, I loved she doesn't even get to open it before the phone rings, and the dude is like, present number 1.
And then she's
you're
like,
just
right.
like, how do you not realize you are being watched?
I mean, well, so the other thing is this. So apparently at the time, crank phone calls were actually a very common trope in horror films because, again, that's an easy way to scare people. So I just wonder, like, because obviously also crank calls were common, be they threatening or not, in day-to-day life with these landlines. So I just also wonder if she's kind of like, oh, whatever, like, this is common. This happens all the time.
I have a phone. People will call me. Some of them are not going to be doing it because they actually want to talk to me.
Exactly.
So she opens this gift. She has been gifted a telescope. It's not as good or as phallic as the one that we've seen the stalker use, but it'll still do.
It's also probably expensive as fuck, so honestly, good gift.
Indeed, yeah. Telescopes are not cheap on the best of days, so... Okay, yeah, and she also gets another phone call about her air conditioning right before she goes to bed.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so the next day, we get present number 2, and this is delivered by doorman Charlie, who is played by Edgar Justice, and I was trying to clock the doorman because there's a scene later where she goes to pick up the mail, and the doorman isn't at the desk, and I was like, oh, maybe it's the doorman.
Yeah.
It's not the doorman.
so you were really hoping this was going to be someone we knew.
I 100%, yeah. I wanted a reveal, and this movie is just like, no, it's a dude.
Unfortunately, we are not in the era of reveals with our whodunits yet.
Yeah, I guess not. So this one I found really creepy. Like, a telescope is kind of, okay, now you can be a stalker / voyeur as well. There's not a lot of ways you can misread getting a bikini from someone. And then the phone call that accompanies it is, I hope it fits.
This is definitely the one, though, where it's like,
this is
something's
not okay.
going on, and you better go.
I mean, she obviously reacts badly because on her date with Paul that night, she has made him a frankly shitty-looking meal, and it clearly tastes badly because he is trying to cover for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is where we get a little bit more of her backstory. She insinuates that there's a long story about a man in New York, and that's as much recognition as we maybe get that she was the woman from the opening scene.
See, though, that's the only thing. I'm actually going to say I don't think she's the woman from the opening scene, because if she was in New York, I think the speech we get later is like, he's managing buildings in this area. So he wouldn't have time to be in New York doing this and then follow her to LA.
Yeah, I also thought that was weird because, especially if you tie in, there were 4 other women, it seems more likely that, yeah, she is just the new victim. But if not, then I'm like, well, why do we start the film in New York?
Yeah.
It's just, it's one of those things where I don't know that John Carpenter thought it through all the way.
Yeah, it might be a plot hole.
Yeah. Anyway, so she is also unabashedly frank in saying it's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit slow to warm up to men in terms of physicality.
I love what a great conversation too. Like, I mean, like it's sad for her, but again, this frankness that I'm just like, oh, good. Like, I don't see this very often. Again, even in movies today.
Yeah. Instead, normally we would get a scene of Paul drinking with his buddies, and they'd be like, "So, have you fucked her yet?" And he'd be like, "No, she's just a little frigid, guys.
She's a little frigid. A wee bit frigid."
Oh, well, you just gotta warm her up, if you know what I'm saying. Oh, you know what? That's what Steve would say.
Oh my god, what's the movie? Oh my god, all cheerleaders die. Oh yeah, like that cold refrigerator.
Oh my god, yes. Previous episode. To it. Okay, so he ends up leaving, and she gets in her own head. And again, I love that we're still doing this. I don't always love it when characters talk to themselves, because I do sometimes find it artificial. But hers, her inner monologue is very endearing. So when she's like, you fucked this up, to her reflection, you're like, yeah, I've done that.
I think, too, because we have a scene earlier where she sings to herself, not unlike what Laurie Strode does in Halloween. So I think that also kind of, if you were going to be bothered by something like that, which I agree with you, I also have similar issues because it just feels like a lazy way to get exposition out.
Yeah. Or
I'm thinking of Fantasy Island when Maggie Q's like, I have to find the fire extinguisher. It's like, yes, bitch, we know.
Oh my god. See, that's how you know Fred was not involved on that version of Fantasy Island.
No.
Fred would have never done that.
But I think having her sing to herself is kind of his way to be like, oh, look, she does this. So it's not too far out of reach. She's also going to talk to herself later.
Exactly. So the stalker does also call her to wish her a good night, and he references her by name, which could be scary, but also you have to imagine people's phone numbers are listed in the telephone directory. So he would know her name if he was calling her.
And unfortunately, we don't have Divine here to rip up the telephone directory in front of a crowd of innocent bystanders.
No, we do not.
Go listen to our episode on female trouble, everybody.
Right. All right. So Paul has taken her concern seriously because, again, time is a bit liminal in this. We never know if it's the next day or if it's been a couple of days, whatever. The next time we see Paul, he reveals that he has been digging into Excursions Unlimited, and he says that it doesn't exist, and he wants her to call the police. So she then has dinner with Sophie that night, and she is distracted enough that Sophie actually addresses it, and we learn that Lee has not been sleeping very much as a result of all of this. That's one sidebar. But this is where we get the really great stuff where Sophie wonders if maybe her distance has something to do with her preference, as in Sophie's preference for women.
And what does she say, Joe? What is her reply to this, which is brilliant?
So I'm paraphrasing. Feel free to correct me if you've got the exact words, but Lee basically says it doesn't bother her to be around men who do that to her all the time, so why should Sophie bother her?
Yep. I'm with men all the time and they don't threaten me, so why should you?
Which is a little bit of a weird thing. I mean, I think Sophie is worried that Lee is misinterpreting their friendship, and she just wants to make sure, hey, I told you you're not really my type. I want to clarify that's still true. So in a way, I'm like, well, Lee, she's not, you're equating men's threatening, leering glances at you with what Sophie is doing, and Sophie is definitely not doing that. But I think Lee's intention is actually just to say, no, I don't have a problem with you.
So you can push back on this if you want, but for me, I read it more as all men, straight men would obviously be attracted to me because they can be, because they are attracted to women. You are in that same ballpark because you're a woman who's attracted to women. So as people who are attracted to women, I'm not threatened by them. Why would I be threatened by you? Even if you're not specifically attracted to me.
Right.
So.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think I just don't love the insinuation, the comparison. I don't think that they're equal, but I don't think Lee means it to be the way that I've taken it. Like, I think I'm misreading it from a contemporary point of view.
But you're right, though. I mean, again, it doesn't help that, again, with the exception of Paul, every single man we've seen in this movie has been, like, trying to hit on Lee.
Shit. Yeah. So Sophie ends up leaving to go on a date. We never see the other woman, but, I mean, Sophie looks like Adrienne Barbeau, so I can only assume that she's going to be pulling some hottie. And Lee is presented with a anonymous bottle of wine. And I didn't look up to see who plays this waitress, if she's done any other acting, but her delivery of just a man. I'm like, you nailed it, sweetie. You got into SEG with that line delivery.
But see, she's also, like, not bothered by it, because she's like, yeah, men just do this for women in the 70s.
Yeah, people just buy drinks for other... And sure, people buy drinks for other people, but I'm just like, that is a full fucking bottle of wine that you're delivering to one woman, and then the man is gone. That's weird.
It was so funny, because she was like, 1971, and I was like, oh my god, that's a really good bottle of wine. It's so old. Oh wait, this is 1978. Okay.
Ooh, it's aged 7 years. It's classique. So Lee goes home, she receives another alarming call, and this time she does decide to report it to the police, and they cannot do anything, so she has this fantastic fucking line, well, if he kills me, you'll be the first to know.
Love it.
So she says this, the lights flicker, and we fade to black, and then we...
Oh, this, by the way, this light's flickering, this is when we get the Halloween. It's actually not at the climax, I'm sorry. It's here, where we just... Because we as the audience know he has been in this house, and she does not.
Nope.
So I love, again, we have Carpenter to just... It just cuts. Like, we just have a shot of a room as the lights go on and off. Then we cut, and we see another room, lights on and off. And it's just this, is he here or is he not? This is creating all the horror in the film.
Yeah, I wish that Lee reacted to it a little bit more. It almost seems like she's looking at the lights and thinking, oh, is that faulty wiring? Maybe I should get that looked at.
What a strange light phenomenon.
Oh, it must just be an LA thing.
We don't have these fancy lights in New York. Oh, actually, no, because the hotel is operated on a computer system. They established that early in the film.
Oh my god. I honestly thought of, like, the smart technology from Gremlins, too.
No, exactly. Yeah, because I was like, is this a real thing that was happening in the 70s? Or did John Carpenter invent this computerized apartment building?
I mean, I feel like it's a sign of the times. We mentioned Looker earlier, and they've got wonky ideas about what technology can do in terms of, like, paralyzing and stunning people and making them go into a fugue state. Like, I think we just thought technology was amazing at this time, and it was going to be, like, really changing our lives in every facet of our being.
I mean, like, what, 10 years before this, maybe 20 years before this, you had the Jetsons that were like, oh, in the year 2030, whatever, we're going to be flying cars around. So...
You know what? Like a fine bottle of 71 wine, in like 8 years, we're going to be flying like the Jetsons, Trace. It's going to be so exciting.
Yes.
Okay, so we touch base with Lee sometime later, and she basically says, you know, I've tried to do all these things. I've changed my phone number. It's unlisted, and yet the calls keep coming. And the police are like, nah, we still can't do anything. We haven't met anybody, but this is on the phone. So she comes home, and she gets a note that has indicated the president of Excursions Unlimited is waiting for her in the garage. And you can tell at this point Lee has had just about enough of this shit. She grabs a letter opener and she heads down to the garage. We do see a man lurking behind a car. She does not see this person.
Yeah, I love that.
And she ends up going into the laundry room, and there's a lot of tension in the way that this hallway goes around a corner, but we can't see what's around the corner, and then we can't see if there's somebody in the laundry room. She gets startled. She drops the knife. She has to hide in a grate. The person drops a cigarette on her.
The only... My suspension of disbelief does not last for this, because she has to pull the grate off and go down and get her letter opener, and she hears footsteps, meaning he is nearby, and she just scrapes this thing across the concrete.
Oh sure. I'm
like, that would have caused so much noise. Literally, if he was anywhere near her, which he was, he would know she was under that grate. But that leads me to believe that he actually probably knew she was under there, because we don't see him look down whenever he drops his cigarette down there. And I'm sorry, as someone who has smoked cigarettes before, you look down when you throw your cigarette down something.
Oh, sure. And this is high suspension of disbelief because this grate is human size. It is conveniently on the floor. She can lift it. She can move it back into place. The whole thing doesn't really make sense as a set piece, but
it's effective.
Kind of liked it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a minor gripe. At the end of the day, it's like, whatever, but
yeah, you're just like, logistically, it's not quite accurate.
No.
So she ends up running into some man as she's coming out of the laundry room. It's another, kind of casual jump scare. It's fine. Mm-hmm. And then she goes back upstairs and we see that there's another letter on the door from Excursions Unlimited being like, sorry, we missed you. And it's just like, oh, fucker, you are playing with me.
Well, I wonder, what was his end game, right? Like, because he was never intending to actually come face to face with her, right?
Oh, no. I think he wanted to see what she was capable of. Would she go into the basement? Would she come armed? Like he's sussing her out. He's trying to figure out how she's going to react to things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's all a power play, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Paul comforts her, and then they go off and they have some sexy sex because, when your life is almost in danger, you're like, I'm going to live. I'm going to let this dude fuck me.
But I do love this, though, because obviously we don't see them fuck, but she is the one leading him to the bedroom.
Mm-hmm. And we can tell because we're seeing this through the telescope's lens.
Yeah.
Because every fucking window is wide open.
She doesn't have drapes yet. Okay, I'm also, like, I don't know about you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like waking up to sun.
No.
I mean, I'm sorry. If it's the weekend, like, cool, yeah, like, let me naturally wake up with the nice sun glow.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm like, no, I get drapes immediately. I don't want the sun hitting me as soon as before I can even, like, get a chance to wake up. I'm sorry. And so the fact that she doesn't have drapes at all in this apartment yet is really dumb to me.
I know. I nearly went down a rabbit hole being like, were drapes not a thing in the late 70s? Did people not have them? Were they brand new?
Drapes have at least been a thing since The Sound of Music, because that bitch made dresses out of drapes. Maybe that's why she didn't have them, because she made all of her dresses were made from the drapes.
Hello, she's a fashion designer. Paul thinks so. Yeah. Okay, so Paul stays the night, and then he gets up and leaves in the morning, and then this is when she gets the call that's basically like, I can see you, and I've been seeing everything, because he's like, hey, I like your robe, I like it better when it's off, and she's just like, what? Shit. So she has a bit of a breakdown in the bathroom.
Yeah, and yeah, this is the first time in the movie, which is, by the way, at the hour mark, that she realizes he can see her.
Yeah, she's really good at the in-person stuff, and the anonymous stalking stuff, she's not quite as quick on the uptake.
Yeah.
So I do like this, though. So she feels like she's under threat, and that means that she is not alone in the apartment for the rest of the film.
Yeah, and now she puts drapes up.
She does put drapes. Paul and Sophie help her. Sophie is looking through the telescope. This is a really fascinating scene to me. So Paul and Sophie are both talking about her situation, and their language is very unique. So Paul says that the stalker is trying to hurt Lee without touching her. And when we get to the definition of stalking in a moment, we'll see that that's actually part of it. But then Sophie explicitly uses the word rape. And I'm like, that is such an important gender distinction.
Yeah. Because basically she's like, she's a bit perplexed because she doesn't know why Lee doesn't want to know who the guy is. So Sophie is on your side, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
But basically when Lee gives her this look, she just goes, oh, you're probably right. Who wants to know their own rapist? Rape is when a man consciously keeps a woman in fear.
Which is, if you think about it, also what stalking is.
Well, and again, John Carpenter wrote that line.
Yeah. So I love that we're literally including this conversation in here because I do think it's really important. And again, we'll contextualize that in just a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
So she does get another phone call that indicates Excursions Unlimited is going to begin the removal process. And I love that language because it's so nefarious and yet also, extremely open to interpretation. Like, maybe they're going to take her couch. Maybe they're going to shred all of her paperwork. Or they could be killing her best friend.
I was about to be like, God, I wonder what a remake of this would look like in today's world. Oh, wait, we just talked about it. Watch her.
Now available on Patreon. Go listen. Yeah. Okay, so they decide after this phone call, that word is I mean, frankly, triggering. So they go down to the precinct and they meet with Detective Gary Hunt, who is played by Charles Cypher, and he basically is useless. He's completely useless.
Yeah, he can't do anything because the Watcher has not broken any laws.
Yeah, so Trace, let's talk about stalking as a law.
Yeah, let's go into this. I'm minorly versed in it, but please, tell me.
Okay, so we've been talking for like solid 70 minutes and change, and let's just do a quick definition of stalking, because as you mentioned, we talked about this in Creep a little bit, but I don't really think we spent a lot of time talking about where the genesis of this came from.
Yeah.
So stalking, in case you were wondering, is unwanted and or repeated surveillance by an individual or group towards another person, and they are interrelated to harassment and intimidation, but they're not the same thing. And they may include following the victim in person or just monitoring them. So that's kind of where Paul's definition comes into play, right?
Right.
It's like he's trying to hurt you without actually touching you. And that's what the definition of stalking truly is. So this is also interesting. I went, this one I did go down the rabbit hole for, because I thought it was interesting. So there's different types of stalkers, Trace. So there's a rejected stalker, and this is someone who is trying to reverse, correct, or avoid a rejection, i.e. often in divorce or separation or termination and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There's resentful stalkers. These people make a vendetta because there's a sense of grievance against the victim, so they're trying to frighten or cause distress in them as a result. There is intimacy seekers. These are people who are looking to establish a intimate, loving relationship with their victims. So they believe that the person is their soulmate or that they were meant to be together. So like when we talked about Valentine for the Horror Quiz Book Club.
I was about to be like, oh, like Valentine.
Yeah. Or Valentine the film, to be honest, also that, right?
Yeah.
Two more, we have incompetent suitors who have poor social or courting skills, and they have a fixation or in some cases a sense of entitlement about an intimate relationship, even though the person may not be interested in them.
Ooh, that was mine.
Yes. So in this case, the victims are often already in a dating relationship with someone else. So yes, that is your situation.
Yep, there you go.
And then the final one, and the one that I would suggest we are seeing in Someone's Watching Me, ! Are predatory stalkers. So these people spy on the victim in order to prepare and plan an attack, often sexual, on the victim.
But, okay, so in this case, though, Lee can't do anything about it. Because he hasn't actually done anything to her. Although, here's the thing. If she had found this bug earlier, that to me is like, cool, he has broken and entered in my house.
Yeah, you could probably get him for the B&E, but because he has only made phone calls and sent her letters, and he hasn't technically said, like, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to hurt you even, they can't do anything. And part of the reason for that, too, is because stalking is not a crime in 1978.
And it won't be for a long time.
It would take 12 more years until California would be the first state to criminalize stalking, and most of the other states would follow suit. But interestingly enough, there's been a couple of updates to that statute and sort of like amendments and other laws. One that I found was interesting was the Violence Against Women Act of 2005, and they defined stalking as engaging in a course of conduct directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to A, fear for his or her safety or the safety of others. So that's like far more broadly inclusive, right? And interesting gendered language. And then B, suffer substantial emotional distress. So it doesn't even have to be that they want to hurt you physically or sexually. It's that if they are causing you emotional distress by the stalking. So like your situation, Trace, where it was like, I'm getting emails from this person.
They're fighting my job. They're reaching out to my job, things like that.
Yeah. So that alone is now considered stalking, and it is criminalized behavior.
Oh, good to know. I didn't look that up when I was getting stalked. I probably should have done that.
Although, interestingly enough, it's still defined as the Violence Against Women Act, which I think in part because we really introduced stalking as a result of a number of high-profile cases against women, and it was often perceived as only women will really be stalked.
So that's the thing, though. So, because the thing that happened in 1990, so federal law regarding the release of personal information through of the DMV was changed because there were two very specific cases, and I'll just briefly touch on this, but one was in 1982, an actress named Teresa Saldana, who played Joe Pesci's character's wife in Martin Scorsese's Raging Bull.
Right.
Her stalker hired a private investigator who obtained the unlisted phone number of Saldana's mother, called her mother, posed as Scorsese's assistant, said he would needed her address to contact her about a film role.
Yeah.
And he does this, stabs her in broad daylight outside of her door with a hunting knife. His attack was so fierce that the blade bent.
Oh my god.
Yeah. She was hospitalized with 10 stab wounds. She went through a 4-month hospital stay, but I wanted to bring her up only because we all handle trauma differently, right? Her role was to just tackle it head on. She became a very vocal advocate of anti-stalking laws.
Oh, she survived.
Oh, she survived, yes. She even relived the incident, playing herself in the made-for-TV movie Victim for Victims, the Teresa Saldana story. So she actually relived her own stabbing, playing herself in this made-for-TV movie in the 80s.
I have heard this story before, yeah.
So but she also did it again. There's an episode of a TV show called Hunter where she also, reenacted her attack.
My god, so brave. Holy shit.
Unluckily, though, so in 1989, this is the big one. We have Rebecca Schaefer, who, she was an actress. Her stalker had been going after her for 3 years. He eventually gave up after a while. Then he saw her in the black comedy Scenes from a Class Struggle in Beverly Hills, in which she appeared in bed with another actor. This enraged her stalker, apparently out of jealousy. He thought that she should be punished for becoming another Hollywood whore. And he learned about the Teresa Saldana stabbing and how the man had used a private investigator to obtain her address. Because again, that's 82. This is 89. We still don't have these laws in effect. So he paid a detective agency in Tucson $250 to get Schaefer's home address from the Department of Motor Vehicle Records.
Can you imagine just like a public office giving out your private information so someone can come and fucking kill you?
Oh, and that's exactly what he did. He went to her, he roamed the neighborhood where she lived, asked people if she actually lived in this house, and once he was certain that the house where he was her address, he rang the doorbell, she answered, he pulls a handgun, shoots her in the chest at point-blank range, she dies in the hospital. Oh, man. This guy, by the way, so he confesses immediately, and the prosecutor in his case was none other than Marcia Clark.
What?
I know! I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at the case. This is terrible. But everyone, of course, Marcia Clark is the prosecuting attorney in the O.J. Simpson trial.
Wow. So many weird connections.
I know. But yeah, so we get this Driver's Privacy Protection Act, so you can no longer go through the DMV to get people's addresses. And then it eventually helped pass the 1990 passing of America's first anti-stalking law in California, Penal Code 646.9, which you've already alluded to.
So basically, in 1978, when this film is taking place, Lee can catalog all this stuff. She can do everything that they're telling her to do, but it's technically not illegal, and they have nothing that they can charge this person for.
It's so fucking frustrating.
Yeah, and to me, it confirms how scary it is when you know that you're in danger, when you know somebody is doing something to you, and just the sheer powerlessness, because you would say, oh, well, this is what the cops are for. Someone is going to protect me. And this person's like, nah, sorry, can't do anything for you.
Yep. I liken it to, because it's like a thing where it's like, also even later, when they think they've caught the guy, and she's like, okay, cool, I'm probably safe. I liken it to having bed bugs or scabies, because you never...
Never truly rid of them.
But as someone who has had scabies and bed bugs, and I promise I'm a clean person, having either one of these things does not denote cleanliness.
As someone who also had bed bugs, I will co-sign on that. It is not a poor hygiene symptom.
Exactly, but it's a thing where, again, they come and they treat it. They can either, do heat or they do chemicals. But it's like you have to wait.
Yeah.
Because it's never a for sure thing that they're going to get all of them. And you have to just wait and sleep in your bed and hope that you don't wake up with bites the next morning. And it is a really mentally taxing experience. And so...
Yep.
It's the same thing with this, where I'm like, oh my god, like, you just don't know. I mean, you constantly think you're being watched. It's so stressful.
So what you're saying is that if they remade Someone's Watching Me, ! It would be, instead of a killer, she has bed bugs.
Oh my god, but carnivorous bed bugs.
Oh my god. And they're giant.
Yes, oh my god. It's like ticks.
So Lee does what any rational person would do when the cops tell them, hey, we can't do a fucking thing for you. She goes drinking.
You know what? Good for her.
Good for her. Yeah. This is kind of the last moment of levity that we'll get in the film. So they do go back to the apartment because Lee says she will not be chased out of her own house, which, even as I'm frustrated with some of the decisions that she makes, it's moments like these where I think, nope, I still really like you, lady. You're solid.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And we get the reiteration that, yes, Sophie is moving to Fort Worth very soon, by the way. She's not going to wait this out with Lee.
I really like you, but I need to get to lesbian hot zone Fort Worth.
Fort Worth, Texas.
Yeah, so we get another phone call which confirms that the dude is still out there and he can see the drapes, so we know that he is within sight. So Sophie goes into investigation mode. She uses the telescope that Lee has and she spots somebody else, and it happens to be this dude from the laundry room that we got the jump scare with.
Yep.
So, he is immediately arrested, he is interrogated, he is a part-time electrician with keys to her building, so those flickering lights and that open door, everything's coming up this dude.
And unfortunately, in case you couldn't tell, he's not the guy.
He is not the dude, but he is sent off to... Des Moines?
Des Moines, Iowa.
Also lesbian hot zone? We don't know.
But here's the thing. They caught the guy. Mm-hmm. They pressured him out of town.
They got him fired. Yep.
Lost his job, lost his pension, and now he's living in Des Moines, which I'm assuming is his hometown. But it's like, this guy's life is ruined.
It's over.
Is really interesting, though, right? Because in this post-Me Too era we live in, isn't this the thing that all the guys always complain about?
Oh my God, he got cancelled.
Yes, exactly. Which, I mean, again, to an extent, it's like, yeah, this was unfortunate just because we learned that the Watcher was also kind of framing this guy, I think. For setting him up.
Yeah. Hence the flickering lights.
Unfortunately, I mean, all evidence did point to this man, though.
Yeah, it's very much a, oh shit, you are a perfect scapegoat, sir. And also now you live in Des Moines.
Oh, God, poor guy. Iowa. I've never been to Iowa, but Iowa.
Hey, Terry lives in Iowa. Be nice.
I thought, did he move back? I thought he lived in Kansas.
Yeah, he lives in Iowa.
Wait, okay, but does he like Iowa?
Sure.
Terry, let us know.
Okay, so... thinking that her stalker has been apprehended, we get... this is the last moment of levity. It's all, like, I could see a song and dance number in this part. She is throwing open those drapes. She is living large. She's letting the sun into this apartment. And then she gets a new letter, and it says that the removal process will begin immediately.
Oh, my God.
And so we bring Detective Hunt back in. He thinks that it's nothing, and she... doesn't buy that for a second, so she starts spying on the neighbors with the telescope.
Yeah. We haven't mentioned it but it happens a lot. Carpenter loves shooting, like, this building from the ground level, as it's almost like vertigo inducing, where we just see how tall this building is.
Yeah, and I like, because I live in a tall condo building, and one of the things that really became apparent during the pandemic, when we were sort of all just stuck living inside and spying on each other, frankly, you can see so much of other people's lives just by virtue of your proximity to them when you live in the downtown core. Like, I can see fully into my neighbors' bedrooms. I can see them when they turn on lights. I've seen them making food, dancing, exercising. And I don't know who any of these people are. So the idea that you add a telescope into that, really, you're able to follow somebody's entire life as long as they don't have drapes up.
Oh my God! See, you're not tempted?
I'll be honest. I have thought about getting a telescope because
I got my telescope right here. What are you talking about?
I mean, are iPhones not like miniature telescopes with the camera lens that they have nowadays? But
valid point. I was about to come back. You're like, no, actually, you were kind of right.
Here's the thing. I had a brief fixation with a neighbor of mine whose name I didn't know, and Brian and I constructed a full, fictitious relationship that these two people had. We named him Nathan. We saw them have sex once, and it was very embarrassing for everyone because they saw us see them. Because he walks into the bedroom, dick swinging, and then we're like, oh my god, we're on the balcony. We can see you, dude. And we just see him immediately flick the light off like, shit, people were seeing that.
Oh my god. See, he should have been like more of an exhibitionist and been like, all right, enjoy the show, fuckers.
Anyway, they moved, and it was very sad.
Oh my god. What is, there's a movie where like it's two people are like they're people watching, but they give dialogue to the people based on their body language. So they're like
talking about the voyeurs. Because,
no,
yes.
but maybe I haven't seen it, but if it happens in that movie, then sure.
Justice Smith, Sydney Sweeney, sex, good shit. It's really bad, but also really great. Everybody
don't worry, now that I finished
it.
My Euphoria catch up, I will now go watch The Voyeurs.
Well, yeah, because you get to see her tits in that one again.
Her enormous tits that are just...
Okay, let's move on. I just want roles for her that doesn't involve her having to take her top off, because I'm like, she's really talented, but also she just doesn't have to do nudity for everything.
The White Lotus, there you go.
There we go. Okay, so Lee does spot a man with a telescope in the penthouse, and she spirals. So she calls Sophie in. Sophie has not left for lesbian hotspot, Fort Worth, yet. She has walkie-talkies, so she's like, Sophie, you take this walkie-talkie, I'm gonna go investigate. So she goes into the other building. She goes up to the penthouse floor. She flips the breakers to get in the mood. Love that line. And then she breaks into this dude's apartment and she finds recording equipment and a log of all the times that she has been called. So this is definitely the stalker. And then she gets to watch as Sophie is murdered via the telescope.
So, unfortunately, as much as I hate to, like, call this the bury your gays trope, unfortunately, that is what this is.
It is, 100%.
It is the only character who is not the killer who is killed in this movie. And it sucks because you know they can't kill Paul because he has to maybe save her, which luckily that doesn't actually, I'm sorry, that's not what happened, so why can't they kill Paul?
Yeah.
We don't kill any of her male suitors, which, again, I'm a little surprised at, right? Like, why doesn't the killer... He sees them hitting on her, but I guess maybe because she never gives them the time of day, so they're never a threat to him.
Yeah, to me, this would have been the perfect opportunity to kill Steve. Like, Sophie's already gone to Fort Worth, so Steve offers to come and help her out, and then he gets murdered because the killer thinks that Steve is fucking her.
Wait, Steve or Paul?
Steve, because we never see Steve again, right?
Yeah, after the call, when she does the now you know what time it is, we never hear from Steve again.
I think in a contemporary film, he would continue to be more of a main character, and he would be killed.
Honestly, like if Sophie were more of a stereotypical like portrayal of a lesbian, I would be less bothered by the bury your gays trope because I'm like, yeah, cool, that's what this is. But because Carpenter has treated this character with so much care. It almost, I mean, it doesn't undo it, but it makes it more disappointing that this is the end for this character.
100%. And I think the reason that she is killed from like a narrative character-based point of view is because she is the person that Lee is actually closest to. Like, killing Paul would make sense, but yeah, we need the promise of heterosexual romance at the end of the movie. Blah, but whatever. This is a movie for presumably straight housewives. So it makes sense to then kill the person who is next nearest and dearest in Lee's heart. And unfortunately, that's Sophie.
Yeah, and so I don't think there's any intentional malice on Carpenter's part of like, oh, we're killing her because she's a lesbian. It's just unfortunate, like looking at this, 40 plus years later, it's kind of like,
yeah, it sucks. It fully sucks. And honestly, I would be less disappointed if other people had also been murdered, but it's like one death in this entire movie. Yeah, and it's Sophie? Come on.
It's the lesbian. Yeah, exactly. So it's a give and take. We get this amazing portrayal of a lesbian in 1978 NBC TV movie. But she also gets killed.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So obviously Lee freaks out when she goes back to the apartment, though the body isn't there and the police can't find her. They just default assume that she has gone to Fort Worth, which to me is also, I know that this is not the intention, but to me that's extra damning in a kind of interesting way where it's like, oh, well, this lesbian's just disappeared. We presume she's gone to Fort Worth. We're not even going to
disappear all the
with
time.
Honestly, right? It's like, we're not believing women, and also we don't care about queer people.
It's like Valentine when they're like, "Oh, that blonde girl went to."
She went to L.A.
Went to L.A. Or that same actress in Urban Legends Final Cut. Oh, she went to wherever.
Yep.
she had an ER audition in New York.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting? No one has seen that actress again, so maybe she is dead.
Was it Joshua Jackson in Urban Legend? Oh yeah, he's going on a ski trip.
Yeah. Classic trope. So, interestingly enough, the penthouse has also been cleaned. So the recording equipment, the logbook, all that kind of stuff has been removed. And it's like, oh no, this J.D. Nichols person, he's been traveling. So it couldn't have been him. So just to add like an extra little twist to the knife, at home, Lee also discovers a message written in the bathroom that says, "No one believes you." But it's from condensation from the shower. So of course, that's not proof.
Yeah, it's the what lies beneath, you know?
Oh, see, I was actually thinking the end of I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Oh, yeah. No, valid point. Remember what lies beneath where it's like, you know. You know what?
You know what?
What am I supposed to know, you stupid ghost? Spell it out.
Oh, God. Yeah. So at this point, Lee has just about had enough, so she ends up kind of collapsing on the table in a daze, and at this point she sees the microphone has been under there. So she knew she was being watched, but she didn't know that they had sound, and now she knows the whole thing.
It's really weird though. This is shot very weird because she gets upset and she just grabs the desk and pulls it towards her instead of throwing it up like away from her.
It's very much like, well, if I'm gonna go down, I'm taking this desk with me.
Well, and so it just like falls on her and it's like, girl, you're trapped under this desk now. But yes, thank God she sees the recording device.
So she's now properly freaked out. So she barrels out into the hall. She's briefly trapped in the elevator. This doesn't come to anything, but I still like it visually.
Well, it's claustrophobic because, I mean, at this point, like, her home is supposed to be a safe space for her, right? As you've already noted, the apartment is very large and spacious.
Yeah.
So as the film goes on, the apartment becomes less of a safe space for her. And you can actually see it. If you clock the film, every time she walks into the apartment, she looks a bit more on edge each time. And Hutton channels those very well, like subtly, as you go from scene to scene. But then, in this elevator, it's like, oh, you don't have an open space anymore. You are trapped in here in this tiny space, which is also representative of the apartment you call home.
And it's also a final reminder, hey, the technology component is important here. Like, it's somebody who's tech savvy, who knows how to control this building, because how did he trap you in this elevator unless he has the means to access it?
This fucking computerized apartment complex.
Indeed. Yeah. So Paul wonders just that. He's like, how could this person control two different apartment buildings? So this leads them to investigate the control man, Herbert Stiles, who will be played by George Scaff, I guess. We barely see this person. Like, it could just be a man in the dark for all we know.
I think we see his face once in the very end of the movie.
Maybe. Like, if I had to pick him out of a lineup, it'd be a no-go.
No, couldn't tell you.
All right, so we're nearly done. Lee breaks into his home. She finds specs on all the microphones, empty Excursion Unlimited letterhead. She calls Paul to say, hey, this is what I've discovered. I'm coming home. And when she gets there, this creeped me out so much. She finds a fake suicide note. So she's like, oh shit, this dude's gonna kill me now.
Because we found out, like, all of the girls, the 4 girls he's been with previously, that he stalked previously, they all died by suicide. It's like, okay, but, he killed them when he was done with them.
Yep, and that's exactly what happened. So this apartment is dark, and she is just attacked, and she is nearly thrown out the window. And I love the way that this is shot. We are getting overhead shot looking straight down towards the ground.
Yeah.
As Lee's, I'm going to say, nearly full body is being pushed out, and she is just kind of like grabbing onto whatever she can to stay inside.
Yeah, I love this. Also, this whole scene when she runs in, she's like rushing around, like looking for us, because she's trying to find him. She knows he's there.
Yeah.
We're getting POV shots from her. And I think this also is what Carpenter borrowed for the opening of Halloween when we have young Michael's POV as he walks around the house, because we have a shot where she's looking around, she's trying to find something, and she kind of grabs for, I want to say a weapon maybe, but it's done like that when Michael Myers grabs his first weapon.
Right. Yeah.
I love that she just calls him out too before he attacks her. She's like, All right.
What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?
Exactly. But oh no, because the shot, she takes the chair, she breaks the window, and she reaches it up again. Did it not remind you of Wait Until Dark?
Yeah, 100%. As soon as she walked in and it was dark and there was no lights to be turned on, I was like, oh shit, here we go again.
Yeah, it's not as effective of a jump scare, but it's still really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, folks, if you want to hear us break that down, first, I feel like we talk about it a lot in our Hush episode because we're talking about like women with disabilities trying to struggle against people in the dark.
Yeah. because my husband's never seen that movie and I've been wanting to rewatch it. We should just program that, even though I don't think it's queer, outside of the fact that it's Audrey Hepburn.
Right. Yeah. Ooh. It's like that and Mimic. Keep adding them to the list.
Oh my God. Honestly, though, we should cover Charade one day.
I've never seen it.
oh my God, Joe. Charade is like one of my absolute favorite movies of all time.
Oh, really? Okay. Throw them on the list. So, yeah. So we're basically done. Yeah. We get to see repeated shots. There's one piece of glass left in the window. So as she's being shoved out, she's trying to grab it and she finally succeeds and she just gets this guy fully in the back. It's really good.
And then he falls to his death.
Well, he tries to charge at her and she just kind of sidesteps him and then gives him like a little push like, here you go. I'll help you on your way out.
And unfortunately, the movie's over. And
the movie is over. I was like, wait, did I miss something? Is there? No, we're just done. Credits.
No, it's not an uncommon trait with movies of the time, right? Like, killer's dead, boom, roll credits.
Sure. Yeah,
but it's just, again, in a movie like this, it's tackling these feminist themes and, like, what it means to be a woman in the modern day, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of upsetting that we don't get any more catharsis from her. Because, again, her best friend is dead. And yeah, she's killed this guy, but, like, what about her life?
Right? And wouldn't it have been satisfying to have Detective Hunt have to reconcile with the fact that he hung this woman out to dry and she had to deal with it all herself?
Yes. I mean, that trust me, look, when it comes to revenge, I'm always, or if I'm going to kill someone for revenge or whatever reason, I don't want to surprise and kill them, I want them to know that they're about to get killed and that it's me, the one doing the killing. And so many movies don't use that. And I'm like, that's the catharsis. Like, why do I want to kill someone and have them not know that I'm killing them? That's so stupid.
I like that you're just very publicly declaring to thousands of people this is how you're going to do it.
The fact that, that's the thing, right? If I kill someone, you're going to know that I did it because I'm going to make it very well known that I did it.
But then he's going to pin it on an electrician and that person's going to get sent to Des Moines.
What is Kill Bill like? I want you to know that they know. I want them to know that I want them to know.
Love it. Oh, we should do Kill Bill too.
That is someone's watching me.
Yes.
Final thoughts, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we said off the top, this isn't like the best movie that I've ever seen. It is very clearly a made-for-TV movie. It doesn't have all the kinds of bells and whistles that you're going to see with a larger production. But I think Lee is such a fascinating character. Sophie is fucking amazing. And we haven't really said, it's Adrienne Barbeau. So
yeah,
she's stunning. She's got the voice. She's just oozing charisma. Like, I wanted so much more of Sophie in this movie.
Yeah.
And I just think the pair of them are really fun. And yeah, it's early John Carpenter. Like, this is our first John Carpenter on the pod, Trace.
Oh my God.
I know. But it's because he doesn't do queer shit.
Yeah. We'll do some fun ones because, I would, Big Trouble in Little China, that has Kim Cattrall. We'll call that queer.
There we go. We could probably do Ghosts of Mars since it is so female-centric as well, but that movie's not great.
I would maybe. The sets in that movie look like they're out of a John Waters film or a high school theater production. So you know what? It might be camp.
That is so rude. I listened to the movie Oubliette episode on it, and the way that they created the actual, Mars parts is, epic.
Well, it doesn't look that way.
I didn't say the sets. I just said the Mars parts.
It doesn't look good. I have seen that movie twice, okay? You cannot convince me it's good.
So rude. I will follow Natasha Hedstrich anywhere.
Oh my god, I know. I mean, what, we can do Kirstie Alley in Village of the Damned. We can do...
Actually, Village of the Damned is probably the best one.
Yeah, it's probably the best one, which it's really sad because it's not that great of a movie.
No.
Anyway, no, I'm going to agree with you. I really like this movie. I think I'm a bit stronger on it than you. This is a 3.5 out of 5 for me, but a lot of that just comes from I just really am impressed with how progressive so much of this is, which may be cutting it a bit too much slack, but you know what? I'm fine with that. It's a movie.
Fair enough.
All right, everyone. Well, before we announce what we're covering next week, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at HorrorQueers, or you can shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered, or go to our YouTube channel to watch us have interviews with different horror filmmakers, queer horror filmmakers sometimes, and of course our monthly hangouts where we talk with our journalistic peers about a random topic every month. If you want to chat with other listeners, go join our Facebook Horror Queers group because we've got a pretty good following there. And if you have a moment, please rate and review us on your podcatcher of choice. We do love a good review on Apple Podcasts, though, so do that.
Can we get a little bit of momentum going on there?
Unfortunately for you, Joe, you only see the reviews that come in Canada.
In that case, Canadians, yes, lacking.
It's okay. We've been light on the U.S. side, too. So United States of Americans do that.
You know what? All of you people in Des Moines and Fort Worth, we gave you plenty of shoutouts in this episode. Least you can do.
Oh my god, yes. Do that, Des Moinesians and Fort Worthians. And if you would like even more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. We are in August, so if you subscribe today, you will get all this and more. We've got episodes on Netflix's Resident Evil TV series prequel thing, the Predator prequel movie thing, yep. Prey. They/Them, the queer horror film on Peacock. Bodies, 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 the queer A24 whodunit film. And a 25th anniversary audio commentary on Paul W.S. Anderson's Event Horizon. And I don't know if it's queer, but maybe we'll make it that way.
I don't care if nothing's queer about it because that movie is everything.
I'm excited to revisit it, though, because I've only seen it once and I liked it, but I definitely wasn't... People love that movie, so I'm excited to give this a revisit with some fresh eyes.
Yeah.
Joe, what are we talking about next week?
Well, this is exciting. We're going Orca Queer, and we're revisiting Clive Barker Trace. So I think maybe a very, very small handful of people will have already heard this episode because it was our live Fright Gown video that we did with Lee Monson. But yeah, we're going to be talking about Nightbreed.
Yes. All right, everyone. There's a lot of different cuts of that, but honestly, just watch whatever one you want to watch, and we'll talk. We'll go through everything.
Yeah, I think we watched the director's cut because that's the best of the most accessible ones. But also, it's very funny. I thought you were suggesting there's multiple cuts of that episode, and it's true because we do get a little bit, by which I mean a lot, drunk by the end of that episode.
Oh, fuck. Yeah, we do. Honestly, if we haven't done a drunk episode in a very long time for many reasons. But yeah, you'll hear us slowly degrade in mental faculties as that episode goes on.
Yeah, more so than usual. It's a good time.
More so than usual. But until then, y'all, we can cross out someone's watching me.
Someone's watching me. And cross out Horror Queers.
Atlas Avenue, a long stretch of road that encompasses everything the city of Kennett Heights has to offer. Neon lights, traffic, crime, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and the craziest of characters. My office was above it all. My name is James Locke, and I'm a PI.
Hello, Mr. J. How the hell you doing today?
Good, Edith. Nearly every year I have a new case. New people to meet, new clues to discover, and new problems to solve. But I do it the old-fashioned way. No technology. Nothing post-1950. Hell, I don't even listen to podcasts, but you should. Atlas Avenue Beat is a spoof of the film noir genre with goofy characters, tons of wordplay, and non-stop raunchy humor. There's also 3 whole seasons out right now with more on the way. Just search for Atlas Avenue Beat wherever you listen to podcasts or visit us online at bloody.fm.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.